Fall is here and class is back in session. It's a busy time for students and faculty, and with a new school year comes new adventures, new experiences, and new goals to achieve.
But as much promise and excitement as the fall semester brings, there can also be a dark side to it, one in which the unthinkable can happen. I'm Amy Slashberg.
And I'm Megan Sachs, and we're the host of the podcast Campus Killings.
As educators and criminologists, we teach, research, write, and podcast about victims, offenders, and the issues that surround our criminal justice system.
Amy and I have both worked in the field of criminal justice for 20 years. Myself in law enforcement and Amy in the mental health field.
In Campus Killings, we'll dive into some of the most shocking and tragic murders to happen on school grounds, and we'll provide our analysis on the cases we cover as both educators and trained criminologists.
We'll discuss what went wrong and what could have been done differently to prevent the tragic outcome. Campus Killings is available everywhere you listen to podcasts.
Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode of Campus Killings.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of True Consequences Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Carter-Landin, and before we get too far into this, I need to give a few thanks. First, I need to thank Jackie Moranty for writing and researching this script. Many of you may not realize that Jackie is a Native American woman, and I rely on her heavily to tell the stories of missing and murdered Indigenous women. I do this because Jackie can provide perspective and insight that I don't have. And so I am really grateful to her for writing this episode for me. I need to thank Penny T, Kim G, Leela S, and Marie B for being my latest KO-FI supporters. I also need to give a couple of shout outs to my newest Patreon subscriptions. Sabrina A, Wendy C, and Christine D, thank you so much for being my latest patron subscribers. Okay, let's get into the episode. Ranelle Bennett was a beautiful 33-year-old mother of 2 children. She brought her family joy with the stories she would tell. She is very loved and very missed by her family. Ranelle has had no contact with her family since June 15, 2021. She disappeared from her home in Hogback, New Mexico without a trace on that day. Hogback lies on the Navajo Reservation about 12 miles from Shiprock. On the day of her disappearance, her mother, Rose Yazzie, stopped by her home to talk about Ranelle's daughter's upcoming 10th birthday party. They discussed preparations for the party, including hanging decorations and what food to prepare. Ranelle told Rose that she would be at the party. She wouldn't miss it. As Rose was leaving, Ranelle gave her a big, tearful hug. Ranelle hung on to Rose for a very long time. Rose thought it was strange, but now she wonders if Ranelle wasn't in trouble. Maybe Ranelle knew it would be the last time she would see her mother. She was hugging me for a long time, Rose Yazzie said in an interview with KOAT. It wasn't like her. She never hugged me like this. She was kind of crying. The day of the party came and Ranelle never made it. Her daughter sent her several text messages, including one that said, "Mom, remember it's my birthday today." The girl kept looking down the road to see if Ranelle was coming. For many months after that day, Ranelle's son would text his mom to ask her when she was coming home. There has been no answer. A few days after Ranelle's disappearance, Rose called the Navajo police to report her missing. The report was taken, but Rose didn't hear back from them until she called the FBI investigator in Shiprock herself. The investigator told her that he didn't know anything about the report. He had never seen the first report. So, Rose made another one. And the family still has not heard from police or the FBI since. Several days were lost between the first and second reports, valuable time when a person is missing. The family began to search for Ranelle on their own. Ranelle's brother, Gerald Harrison, quit his job in Breckenridge, Colorado, and moved back to Shiprock so he could lead the search for Ranelle. For weeks after filing the second missing persons report, Rose would go to the Navajo Nation Police Department and ask to speak to the investigator working the case. She was always told that he wasn't available. Rose would sit in the lobby for hours waiting to speak to him, but he never acknowledged her. Rose would leave messages asking him to call her, but he never called her back. After the Bureau of Indian Affairs had created a missing and murdered Indigenous Persons Unit in 2021, agents showed up at Rose Yazie's house. This was a month after Ranelle disappeared. They said that they were going to begin an investigation into Ranelle's disappearance. They searched the house and took some items for evidence. 3 months later, when Rose hadn't heard from them, she called one of the agents. He told her that he was waiting on the Navajo Nation to give permission to move forward with the investigation. Rose then called Navajo Nation police to ask what was going on. The Navajo Nation police told her that they were waiting for Missing and Murdered Unit to get back to them. Meanwhile, Gerald was following every lead and every rumor. If someone said they saw Ranelle somewhere, he would go there looking for her. He scoured miles of land on his own, searching for her. Police were never involved in any searches. This area is a vast desert. In many places, there are nothing more than abandoned sheep trails. In some parts, there are only mesquite and prairie grass stretching for miles. The terrain is rough. Searches can only be done on foot or horseback in some areas. Ranelle went missing in June of 2021. The average temperatures through the summer in that area can range from the high 90s to the low 100s during the day. More risk comes from rattlesnakes and scorpions, which call the desert home. Gerald would later tell KOAT, "I would like for the cops to at least be there. At least send one guy with me. I know it's a boring job, but I want to do it." Boring or not, the police should be helping Gerald search. They should be helping every family search. It's their job. And what's more, it's their duty. So many families are left to search on their own with no direction and no help. They're told if they find anything, they should turn it over to the police. Gerald felt that it was his obligation to his family to search for Ranelle. He would later say, quote, "If I can't be the protector of my family, what good am I?" End quote. About 3 months after Ranelle went missing, her family found her shoes and her sweater along a dirt road about 2 miles from her home in Hogback. They turned them over to the police, and law enforcement never contacted them again. Police did try to ping her phone, and they found that the phone was moving around the area, but no one knows if Ranelle was with her phone, and her phone has never been found. Ranelle had been seeing a man named Kendall Johnson for about a month before her disappearance. He would not allow her to introduce him to the family or let family see him. He was in the back bedroom of Ranelle's home when her mother came to talk to her. Rose asked Ranelle if he was there, and she said, "Yes, he's in the bedroom." Rose would become very concerned that Kendall had done something to Ranelle after the police told her about his history. Kendall was known to the police as a bad apple. He had been put in jail about 3 years before. At the time of Ranelle's disappearance, he hadn't been out for very long. In 2016, Kendall had been arrested on federal gun charges. When police tried to arrest him on these charges, he led them on a high-speed chase, then tried to stop them by throwing rocks at the police during the chase. In 2021, he was wanted for being involved with a group of people who were stealing cars and performing home invasions in the Shiprock area. He also had more weapons charges against him. Kendall was known to drop his girlfriends off in the desert without their shoes to find their own way home when he was angry with them. A month after Ranelle's disappearance, Kendall was arrested after another high-speed chase where he and another woman in the car threw homemade spike strips out the windows in order to avoid arrest. He was questioned about Ranelle's disappearance, and he said that he had nothing to do with it, but that he had seen Ranelle after the 15th of June. He would claim that she was with him as late as the 23rd. Ranelle is still missing. Her family feels the loss of their mother, sister, daughter, and auntie. The family is still holding out hope that she's alive and will come home. She was a sweet girl, a sweet lady to her kids. She took care of them, her mother told KOAT. "I miss her, just her laughter and her smile, the stuff she said, it made me laugh," her brother Gerald said. "It's really hard for my son because he was Auntie's baby. He would be like, 'Mom, I miss Auntie. When is she coming home?'" Janelle recalled. Her children are taking Ranelle's disappearance the hardest, though. Janelle told reporters that they get sad. They won't play, so the family tries to keep them occupied to keep the situation off of their minds. So many of these cases don't get the attention they deserve from the media or law enforcement. Ranelle's family has done everything in their power to keep her story alive and keep her name and picture out there, but it's not always that easy. We hear about families being seemingly abandoned by law enforcement when someone goes missing. It seems that this is particularly prevalent on the reservation. Often, jurisdictional issues are cited as the reason that families will never find justice for their loved ones. These issues are confusing and complicated, and they go far deeper than the surface. They're so confusing that even the people on the reservation don't understand. I'm going to attempt to explain the best way I can, and I think it's important for you to remember that this is Jackie's research, and these are Jackie's words. In 2021, the National Crime Information Center listed more than 9,500 missing Indigenous people in the U.S. 1,554 of those cases were still active by the end of the year. That's far too many families searching for their loved ones on their own. According to the Navajo Nation website, more than 60 people are missing from the Navajo Reservation. More recently, the FBI has said that there are as many as 170 missing Indigenous people from New Mexico. That is the highest number of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives from any state in the U.S., and some of these people have been missing since the 1970s. The Navajo Reservation spans 27,413 square miles. It is spread across New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. Roughly 298,000 people are enrolled as members of the Navajo Nation, and 173,000 of them live on the reservation. Usually there are 1 or 2 police officers per 1,000 residents. Tribal police are only required to have a high school education, and they don't get much training, and they are not paid as well as police off of the reservation. Morale among tribal policemen is low and turnover is high. Crime is high on the reservation, as we've seen with Kendall Johnson. He's been in trouble with the law for years. The lack of oversight from any law enforcement agency plays a large role in crime on the reservation. The more unsolved crime you have, the more offenders will try to get away with it. Many times, cases aren't fully investigated or aren't investigated at all. Case reports aren't updated, and there is little to no follow-up. How does this happen? When someone goes missing from the reservation, usually the family will report them to the local tribal police. This office takes a report and they may perform a few searches, but their jurisdiction is limited. If it's thought that the missing person is a victim of foul play, the case will get turned over to the FBI for further investigation. Sometimes the state police will take the report, but if the person is affiliated with a tribe, then the report will still go to the FBI. There are FBI agents assigned to the reservation, so when the report goes to them, they're supposed to begin an investigation. Sometimes this happens and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes, as we've seen with Ranelle's case, the report gets lost. If families don't contact the FBI on their own, the case may never be investigated, and it would go lost and go cold. Many times the FBI investigators won't return calls, and if they do, families are told that the person is an adult and they have every right to be missing. More often than not, the families are told that they should investigate on their own and get a hold of law enforcement if they find any evidence or find the person during their own searches. Often the Bureau of Indian Affairs are called in to investigate crimes. This adds another layer of confusion to investigations. It also adds another avenue for reports and paperwork to get lost. Communication between agencies is scarce, to the point of non-existent. None of them know what the other is doing. They don't collaborate or share information. Reports, documentation, and evidence gets lost. Cases grow cold and many times are forgotten because paperwork gets lost and there is poor communication between the various agencies. Media rarely gets involved unless families speak up and get their attention. Ranelle's case has been covered on a few podcasts and in local media several times, but she certainly hasn't gotten the attention that her case deserves. None of them do. Families feel that they are being ignored, and rightfully so, because they are. The support system that those of us live off of the reservation enjoy as law enforcement doesn't exist there. Much of the reason the FBI gets involved with these investigations has to do with money and resources. The federal government has way more resources than tribes. They have more manpower and better training than tribal police. Another reason the federal government gets involved goes back to 1885, when a white government official observed two native families performing the tradition of nali, or taking things out in a good way. The idea behind this punishment was that the offender would compensate the victim or their family with restitution by performing work for them or giving them payment. The purpose was to compensate the victims, but also to require the offender to acknowledge the offense, accept responsibility, and deal with the underlying problems that caused them to offend. When the officials observed this tradition as punishment for murder that had taken place among the Navajo, they saw the restitution consisted of a couple of horses, some food, and some jewelry. These things are all prized among the Navajo, but to the outside observers, this was not proper punishment. The men went back to the federal government. They decided that it would be better if the federal government punished offenders for crime. They brought forth the death penalty and long prison sentences for indigenous offenders. The federal government has been involved ever since. In 2021, the U.S. government created Missing and Murdered Unit. This was largely backed by the Cabinet Secretary Deb Haaland, a member of the Pueblo Laguna. Haaland promised that the MMU would provide the resources and leadership to prioritize these cases and coordinate resources to hold people accountable, keep our communities safe, and provide closure for families. The MMU promised to feature a website with all the missing and murdered listed on one site. When the website launched, there were 11 cases featured. Only one was a homicide victim. Now, there's 16. Ranelle is one of them. 4 of the featured people have been found, but no one else has been added. Families were angry about this. They gathered in Santa Fe to demand that more awareness be brought to the missing and murdered. They believed that this website was something to just make them happy so that they would go away. Since then, many gatherings have been held by indigenous groups. They want more than a website with 16 missing people on it. They want more attention given to the unsolved murders that have happened on the reservation. They want officials to contact them with updates, and they want real investigations done. They also want the trend of missing and murdered to stop. They want their people to live long and happy lives. They are tired of being ignored. 1,554 people are still missing, and that may not even be a valid number. The actual number of missing and murdered is probably much higher. The FBI recently announced that it would be releasing a list of over 170 missing Native Americans from the Navajo Reservation in New Mexico. This list has been compiled over the last 6 months and combines different databases of missing indigenous persons in the state. In a news conference, the FBI said that it was an effort to help locate the missing, increase transparency, and encourage family members of those who aren't on the list to reach out to local law enforcement to file a report. They said that the records of most of the missing are incomplete or outdated. In an interview with U.S. News, Agent in Charge Raul Buhanda of the Albuquerque FBI division said, quote, "For a long time, the issue of missing Native Americans has been in the news, and a lot of people have been wondering if anybody has been paying attention. I am here to assure you the FBI has been paying attention, and together with our partners, we are taking a significant step toward justice for these victims, their families, and communities." End quote. It wasn't until the missing and murdered started getting national news attention that the FBI decided to make a formal list. But the question remains, will these cases finally be investigated, or will they only be a list of names? New Mexico has the highest number of missing and murdered indigenous people in the U.S. It's about time that the voices of these families were heard. But it remains to be seen if this is just another attempt to pacify the families. Ranelle Rose Bennett is 34 years old. She has brown eyes and black hair and stands at 5 foot 2 inches tall. She weighs 125 pounds. She has Tristan tattooed on her inner forearm. That's Treasten. She has the letter B tattooed behind her left ear. Her nickname is Tiny. She was last seen wearing an orange tank top with black joggers or sweatpants. She was last seen by her mother in Hogback, New Mexico on June 15, 2021. If you have seen Ranelle Bennett or if you have any information on her whereabouts, please contact the Navajo Nation Police Department, Shiprock District at 505-368-1350 or 505-368-1351. Ranelle has been entered into the National Crime Information Center as a missing person. Her mom, Rose, told KOAT in an interview, quote, "I'm just told that she's out there. I'm just hopeful she's still here with us. I have faith that she's still out there." There has been a recent update on Ranelle's case. September 3rd started as a typical New Mexico desert morning. Low temperatures were around 66 degrees, but by 10 a.m. the temperature had risen to 84 degrees. By noon the sun was high and it was 93 degrees. There were no clouds in the sky. The sun beat down on the desert floor. No chance for rain. Monsoon season was over. Ranelle's family had organized a search that was taking place that day. They enlisted the help of Four Corners Canine Search and Rescue to bring dogs and volunteers to help with the search. Four Corners is a Native-owned nonprofit search and rescue organization that helps Native families search for their missing loved ones. People came from Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona to help search for Ranelle. Volunteers walked the desert with the hope that they would find her or at least some clue to where she is. The dogs made their best effort, but soon it was too hot to go on. Unfortunately, they didn't find anything. Ranelle is still missing. Native families are often left to search alone. Law enforcement is not a resource for them. The jumble of agencies becomes a hindrance, and often the very people that the family is told to contact don't answer the phone. Four Corners is an amazing resource for these families who may not otherwise be able to afford a professional search team to help them. They provide search and rescue services at a much lower cost to the families. The searchers are volunteers, but they still have to care for the dogs. They need food, water, and gas money to get where they're going. The families of the victims often depend on donations to help fund the search teams. As a call to action, I would ask that anyone who feels that they'd like to help Ranelle's family, please donate to her sister, Janelle. Janelle's Cash App is going to be listed in the show notes below. It is $JEABENN. The family won't give up searching, but they do need your help to keep going. In a recent conversation, Janelle said the reservation is a huge place to cover, and we can only do so much by foot. Any donation could help bring Ranelle home. It's been too long. Her family deserves to know what happened to her. Thanks for listening, and stay safe, New Mexico.